Picture this. An elderly man in worn clothes stands before a gleaming $3 million supercar, his weathered hands trembling as wealthy customers around him snicker and whisper. The sales staff exchange knowing glances, ready to escort this vagrant out of their prestigious showroom. But what happens next will leave everyone speechless and teach them the most important lesson of their lives. What happens when genius hides beneath humble appearances? Today's story will challenge everything you think you know about judging people by their looks. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Castellano's Exotic Motors, Monaco's most exclusive car dealership. Crystal chandeliers hung above rows of Ferraris and Lamborghinis, each worth more than most people's houses. Ezekiel Zeke Hartmann pushed through the glass doors, his worn leather shoes squeaking against the polished floor. At 78, he cut an unremarkable figure. Faded cardigan, pressed but worn pants, silver hair needing a trim. In his weathered hands, he carried a battered leather satchel, its brass clasps tarnished with age. Dimitri Castellano, the head salesman, noticed him first. His $1,000 suit and perfectly styled hair reflected his belief that appearance was everything. His eyes swept over Zeke with practiced disdain. "Sir," Dimitri approached with a cold smile, "perhaps you're looking for the Honda dealership. It's 10 blocks down." Vivienne Cross, a young sales associate, watched from the reception desk. Something about the old man's dignified posture made her uncomfortable, with her boss's dismissive tone. Near the showroom centerpiece, a stunning Veloce Tempest hypercar in midnight blue, stood Marcus Chen, a tech entrepreneur whose cryptocurrency fortune made him one of Monaco's youngest billionaires. "Looks like someone's grandfather wandered in from the park," Marcus chuckled. "Probably thinks this is a museum." Zeke heard the comment but didn't react. Since his wife Elena's death 6 months ago, he'd stopped caring about his appearance. The clothes that had once been carefully maintained now hung loose on his diminished frame. "I'm just looking," Zeke said softly, his voice carrying a faint German accent. Dimitri's smile became strained. "Sir, these vehicles start at $500,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at—" "I said I'm just looking." Something in Zeke's tone made Dimitri step back. The showroom buzzed with quiet conversations of serious buyers. A woman in white fur pointed at a red Ferrari, while her husband discussed horsepower in rapid Italian. Two men in expensive suits debated Bugatti versus Koenigsegg with casual confidence. Zeke moved slowly through the showroom, his eyes taking in every detail. These weren't just cars to him. They were dreams made manifest, culminations of human ingenuity and passion. He paused at a McLaren P1, running his fingers lightly over the carbon fiber bodywork. "Sir, please don't touch the merchandise." Dimitri appeared at his elbow. Zeke had already moved on, drawn toward the showroom's crown jewel. The Veloce Tempest sat like a sleeping predator, its midnight blue paint absorbing and reflecting light simultaneously. Only 12 of these cars existed worldwide, each hand-built and worth $3,200,000, 0 cents. As Zeke approached the Tempest, conversations grew quieter. There was something reverent in how he moved, as if approaching an old friend. His eyes traced the car's lines with intimate familiarity. "That's quite a machine," Marcus said, stepping beside Zeke. 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds, top speed of 267 miles per hour. They say only the most skilled engineers could have designed something this perfect. Zeke nodded slowly, his fingers hovering inches from the surface. "She's beautiful." "She's also $3.2 million, Dimitri interjected, positioning himself between Zeke and the car. "And I really must insist that you don't—" "I built this car." The words fell like stones into still water. Conversations stopped, heads turned. The soft classical music seemed to grow louder in the sudden silence. Dimitri blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said I built this car." Zeke's voice was stronger now, carrying across the marble floors. The silence stretched. Then Marcus burst into laughter. "Oh, that's rich. The old man thinks he built a $3 million hypercar." The laughter was contagious. Other customers chuckled, and even some sales staff couldn't suppress their grins. Dimitri's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said firmly. "This is a serious business establishment, and we don't have time for—" Zeke reached into his leather satchel and withdrew rolled papers. The laughter faltered as he carefully unrolled technical drawings. Their edges yellowed with age. The blueprints were incredibly detailed, showing every curve and angle of the Tempest's design. "These are the original blueprints," Zeke said quietly, spreading them on a nearby table. "I drew them by hand in 1992. The crowd pressed closer. Vivienne gasped as she recognized the intricate specifications that matched the car perfectly. But Marcus wasn't convinced. Anyone could have gotten copies of— "Look here," Zeke interrupted, pointing to a small detail in the engine compartment. "There's a signature etched into the engine block, hidden beneath the intake manifold, invisible unless you know exactly where to look." He walked to the Tempest and popped the hood with practiced ease. The crowd gathered as he pointed to an almost invisible marking in the metal. 92, he said simply. Ezekiel Hartmann, 1992. The showroom fell silent again, but this time with stunned realization rather than mockery. Dimitri's face had gone pale, and Marcus looked slapped. The engine produces 1,847 horsepower through a hybrid system, combining a V12 with 3 electric motors, Zeke continued, his voice growing stronger. The carbon fiber monocoque weighs just 1,293 pounds, and the active aerodynamics generate up to 1,500 pounds of downforce at speed. I know these numbers because I calculated every one. He pointed to specific components, explaining technical details only the car's creator could know. The crowd listened in rapt attention as this unassuming old man revealed the secrets of one of the world's most sophisticated machines. "The reason this car exists," Zeke said, closing the hood gently, "is because I refused to accept that something was impossible. Every line, every curve, every specification was drawn by these hands." He held up his weathered fingers, their trembling suddenly seeming less like frailty and more like the natural result of a lifetime spent in precise work. Vivienne found her voice first. "Mr. Hartmann, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. How could you?" Zeke's smile was sad but not bitter. "I haven't exactly been maintaining my professional wardrobe lately." The story poured out of him then. He told them about his 47 years at Veloce Motors, starting as a junior engineer fresh out of university, and eventually becoming chief of advanced design. He spoke of the Tempest project, how he'd worked nights and weekends for 3 years to perfect the design, only to have the company shelve it due to budget constraints. "They said it was too ambitious, too expensive," he recalled. "But I believed in it. When I retired in 1995, I negotiated to keep the rights. 23 years later, when hypercar technology finally caught up to my vision, I sold those rights to finance my wife's medical treatment." The crowd hung on every word as he described Elena's long battle with cancer, how they'd depleted their savings trying every possible treatment. He spoke of her final days, when she'd made him promise to see his dream car in person at least once. "I came here today to keep that promise," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to see what became of my life's work." Marcus stepped forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect. "Mr. Hartmann, I don't know what to say. I judged you completely wrong." "We all did," Dimitri added, his face flushed with shame. "I'm deeply sorry for how I treated you." But Zeke shook his head. "Don't apologize for being human. We all make judgments based on what we see. The real question is what we do when we learn we were wrong." The transformation in the showroom was remarkable. Customers who had been snickering minutes before now gathered around Zeke, eager to hear more stories from his engineering career. He spoke of the early days of computer-aided design, of hand-calculating aerodynamics before wind tunnel testing, of countless prototypes that had failed before breakthrough successes. "Every great achievement starts with someone willing to be laughed at," he said, running his hand along the Tempest's flank. "I was laughed at plenty in my career. Colleagues said my designs were too radical, too ambitious. But I learned that the only opinion that really matters is your own, and whether you're willing to do the work to prove yourself right." A young boy who had been quietly listening with his father stepped forward. "Mr. Hartmann, did you always want to build cars?" Zeke's eyes lit up. "I wanted to build flying cars, actually, but I figured I'd better master regular cars first." The crowd chuckled, and for the first time since entering the showroom, Zeke seemed truly at ease. He spent the next hour sharing stories and answering questions, transforming the luxury car showroom into an impromptu classroom. He explained how aerodynamics worked, why certain materials were chosen over others, and how the marriage of art and engineering created something greater than either could achieve alone. "The most important thing I learned," he said, "is that innovation requires both technical knowledge and the courage to dream. Anyone can copy what's already been done. It takes real vision to create something the world has never seen before." As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus approached Zeke privately. "Mr. Hartmann, I run a foundation that supports STEM education for underprivileged kids. Would you consider working with us? Your story, your knowledge, it could inspire a whole generation of young engineers." Zeke considered the offer carefully. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that. I'm just an old man who got lucky." "No," Vivienne interrupted, joining their conversation. "You're exactly the right person. You're living proof that genius comes in all packages, that real worth isn't measured by appearance or wealth." The showroom manager, Alessandro Rossi, had arrived and was speaking quietly with Dimitri. When he approached their group, his manner was respectful and apologetic. "Mr. Hartmann, I've just spoken with our corporate headquarters. They would be honored to offer you a position as our brand ambassador, with full compensation and benefits. Your name carries tremendous weight in the automotive engineering community." Zeke smiled gently. "That's very kind, but I think I've had enough of the corporate world. However," he looked at Marcus and Vivienne, "I might be interested in that foundation work. Elena always said I was a better teacher than businessman." The arrangements were made quickly. Marcus would fund the Hartmann Foundation for Automotive Innovation, and Vivienne, inspired by the day's events, resigned her position at the dealership to serve as the foundation's program coordinator. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the showroom floor, Zeke prepared to leave. He took one last look at the Tempest, his creation that had outlived his career, his marriage, and nearly his hope. "Thank you," he said to the car, as if it were an old friend, "for proving that dreams don't have expiration dates." Dimitri approached with a genuine smile. "Mr. Hartmann, I hope you'll forgive an old salesman for learning something new today. You've taught me that the most valuable things in life often come in the most unexpected packages." "And I've learned that kindness is a choice," Zeke replied, shaking the younger man's hand. "Thank you for choosing it when it mattered." As he walked toward the exit, the leather satchel once again in his weathered hands, Zeke moved with different bearing. His shoulders were straighter, his step more certain. He had entered the showroom as a broken old man saying goodbye to his dreams, but he was leaving as a mentor ready to inspire the next generation of dreamers. The automatic doors closed behind him with a soft whisper, and the showroom seemed quieter somehow, as if something important had just departed. But the impact of his visit would ripple outward for years to come, changing how everyone present would view the strangers they encountered, the assumptions they made, and the hidden potential that exists in every human being. This story reminds us that every person we meet carries hidden depths, untold stories, and unrealized potential. The next time you encounter someone who doesn't fit your expectations, remember Ezekiel Hartmann, and ask yourself, what wonders might be hidden behind that humble exterior? If this story inspired you to look beyond first impressions and treat everyone with dignity and respect, smash that like button. Share your own experiences of being underestimated or discovering hidden talents in others in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us of the extraordinary potential that exists in ordinary people. Because sometimes the most powerful engines come in the most unexpected packages. 3 months after that transformative day at Castellanos Exotic Motors, Zeke stood in the converted warehouse that now housed the Hartmann Foundation for Automotive Innovation. The space buzzed with the energy of 30 young minds, each workstation equipped with cutting-edge design software and traditional drafting tools. The scent of metal shavings and electric welding filled the air as his first class of students worked on their prototype projects. Professor Hartmann called out Amara Okafor, a 17-year-old from Lagos whose parents had immigrated to Monaco seeking better opportunities. She was hunched over a complex suspension design, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can't figure out why my calculations keep showing instability at high speeds." Zeke approached her workstation, his steps more confident than they'd been in months. The foundation had given him purpose again, a reason to wake up each morning with Elena's blessing echoing in his memory. He examined Amara's work, noting the innovative approach she'd taken to weight distribution. "You're thinking like a mathematician instead of an engineer," he said gently, pulling up a chair beside her. "Mathematics tells us what should work in theory. Engineering tells us what will work when rubber meets road at 200 miles per hour." He pointed to her calculations. "You've accounted for static loads beautifully, but you've forgotten that a car in motion is a living thing. It breathes, it flexes. It responds to forces that exist only when it's dancing with physics." Amara's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "The dynamic loading patterns change everything." "Exactly. Now let me tell you about the time I spent 3 months redesigning the Tempest's rear suspension because I made the same mistake you just did." As Zeke shared the story, other students gradually stopped their work to listen. This had become a daily ritual, technical lessons wrapped in real-world experiences that brought textbook theories to life. "The prototype kept losing control during high-speed cornering tests," Zeke continued. "My team was ready to scrap the entire rear eggs end design, but I kept staring at those test results, knowing something fundamental was wrong with my approach." He pulled up Amara's CAD model on the large screen, his weathered fingers surprisingly nimble on the keyboard. "The breakthrough came when I stopped thinking about the suspension as a static system and started seeing it as a conversation between the car and the road." Kai Nakamura, a quiet 18-year-old from Osaka who'd earned his place through a scholarship program, raised his hand. "How do you design for a conversation you can't predict?" "Brilliant question," Zeke smiled. "You don't design for specific scenarios. You design for adaptability. Watch this." He began modifying Amara's suspension design in real time, explaining each change. "Instead of fighting the forces, we're going to work with them. See how I'm adding compliance here, and notice these progressive spring rates?" The students watched in fascination as the suspension system transformed under his guidance. What had been a rigid mathematical solution became something more organic, more alive. "The real secret," Zeke said, "isn't in the calculations. It's in understanding that every great car has a soul. Your job as an engineer is to give that soul the tools it needs to express itself." Dmitry Volkov, a 15-year-old prodigy from Moscow whose parents had sent him to Monaco after he'd hacked into Tesla's design database, earning both criminal charges and scholarship offers, leaned forward. "But how do you know what the soul wants?" "You listen," Zeke said simply. "You spend time with the machine. You feel its heartbeat through the steering wheel, its breathing through the throttle response. You learn to speak its language." He walked to the center of the workshop, where a partial chassis from an old Formula 3 car served as their primary teaching tool. "When I was designing the Tempest, I didn't just run computer simulations. I built a full-scale wooden mock-up in my garage and sat in it for hours, visualizing every possible scenario. A wooden car? Laughed Isabella Rodriguez, a 16-year-old from Barcelona, whose mechanical intuition had impressed even the most experienced engineers. A wooden car, Zeke confirmed. Elena used to joke that I spent more time talking to that pile of lumber than I did to her, but that mock-up taught me things no computer ever could, the way the sightlines worked, how the controls felt in your hands, whether the design made emotional sense. He gestured to the students' various projects: electric vehicle prototypes, advanced aerodynamic studies, revolutionary engine designs. Each of your projects will face the same challenge. The math might be perfect, but if the soul isn't there, it's just an expensive sculpture. Fatima al-Rashid, a brilliant 18-year-old from Dubai whose family had initially opposed her engineering ambitions, spoke up. Professor Hartmann, what was your biggest failure? The workshop fell silent. Zeke's expression grew thoughtful, and for a moment the weight of decades seemed to settle on his shoulders. The Tempest itself, he said finally. My biggest failure was also my greatest success. He walked to the corner of the workshop where a detailed cutaway model of the Tempest's engine sat on display. I spent 3 years perfecting this design, convinced it would revolutionize the industry. When Veloce Motors shelved it, I thought I'd failed completely. But you proved them wrong, Kai said softly. No. Zeke shook his head. I proved myself wrong. I'd been so focused on creating the perfect machine that I'd forgotten to create the right machine. The Tempest was brilliant, but it was also arrogant. It demanded perfection from everyone who touched it, mechanics, drivers, even the roads it drove on. He picked up a wrench from a nearby workbench, turning it slowly in his hands. True engineering isn't about proving how smart you are. It's about solving problems people didn't even know they had. The Tempest solved the problem of how fast can we go, but it ignored the more important question, why do we want to go fast? Marcus Chen appeared in the workshop doorway, his usual business attire replaced by jeans and a foundation polo shirt. As the primary funder, he'd become a regular visitor, often bringing industry contacts and potential partners. Sorry to interrupt, Marcus said, but we have visitors. The delegation from the Monaco Ministry of Education is here for the evaluation. Zeke nodded, then turned back to his students. Remember what we've discussed. Engineering is storytelling. Every design tells a story about the problem it solves and the people it serves. Make sure your stories are worth telling. As the ministry officials toured the workshop, they were struck by the diversity of the students and the sophistication of their projects. Dr. Catherine Beaumont, the ministry's technical education director, paused at Amara's workstation. This suspension design is quite advanced, she noted, examining the CAD model. How long have you been studying mechanical engineering? 3 months, Amara replied confidently. But Professor Hartmann taught us that engineering isn't about how long you've been studying. It's about how deeply you're willing to think. Dr. Beaumont raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. She moved to Dimitri's station, where the young Russian was demonstrating an AI-assisted design optimization program he'd developed. The traditional approach, Dimitri explained, is to start with human intuition and then verify with computers. But what if we flip that? What if we start with AI pattern recognition and then add human creativity? Interesting, Dr. Beaumont murmured. And this is your original work? Built on Professor Hartmann's foundation, Dimitri nodded. He taught us that the best tools amplify human creativity rather than replace it. The evaluation continued for 2 hours, with each student presenting their work and philosophy. The ministry officials were particularly struck by the students' ability to articulate not just the technical aspects of their projects, but the human problems they were trying to solve. What impressed me most, Dr. Beaumont told Marcus and Zeke afterward, wasn't the technical sophistication, though that was remarkable. It was the maturity of their thinking. These young people understand that Engineering is a moral responsibility. That's all Professor Hartmann, Marcus said. He's taught them that every design decision has consequences that ripple far beyond the drawing board. That evening, as the workshop emptied and the students headed home, Zeke remained behind, working on a special project. For weeks he'd been secretly designing something new, not a car, but a simulator that would allow students to experience the emotional connection between driver and machine. Vivian found him there, hunched over blueprints under the harsh fluorescent lights. "You're supposed to be the teacher," she said, setting down 2 cups of coffee, "but you're still learning, aren't you?" Zeke looked up, his eyes bright with the same passion that had driven him decades earlier. "Elena used to say that the day you stop learning is the day you start dying. These kids are teaching me as much as I'm teaching them." He showed her the simulator design. Traditional driving simulators focus on the mechanical aspects, acceleration, braking, steering response. But this one is different. It's designed to teach empathy. Empathy. Vivian studied the blueprints. "How do you simulate empathy?" "By making the student feel what the car feels," Zeke explained. "When they push too hard, the simulator pushes back. When they are in harmony with the machine, it responds with grace." The goal isn't to teach them to drive fast. It's to teach them to understand what they're creating. Vivian nodded slowly. "Like you did with a wooden mock-up?" "Exactly. But this will let them experience 100 different scenarios without building 100 different cars." He pointed to various components in the design. Haptic feedback here, environmental simulation there, even olfactory inputs to simulate the smell of overheated brakes or burning rubber. "How long will it take to build?" "With the students' help, 6 months. It'll be their final project, a collaborative effort that brings together everything they've learned about engineering, psychology, and human nature." As they talked, Zeke shared his vision for the Foundation's future. "I want to create a new kind of engineer," he said. "Not just someone who can solve technical problems, but someone who understands the human story behind every design challenge." He pulled up images on his tablet, concept sketches from his students' portfolios. "Look at what they're creating. Amara's designing suspension systems for developing countries where road conditions are unpredictable. Mitri's AI doesn't just optimize for performance, it optimizes for joy. Isabella's working on adaptive interfaces that respond to drivers with physical disabilities." They're not just building cars, Vivian realized. They're building bridges between technology and humanity. Exactly, and that's what the industry needs right now. We've mastered the technical aspects of automotive engineering. What we haven't mastered is the human aspect. Zeke stood up, walking to the window that overlooked Monaco's harbor. The lights of luxury yachts twinkled in the distance, while the city's famous casino glowed like a jewel against the Mediterranean night. "You know what I've learned from this experience?" he said quietly. "It's not enough to build something perfect. You have to build something meaningful. The Tempest was perfect, but it was also cold. These kids are learning to build cars with warm hearts." Vivienne joined him at the window. "Do you think they'll succeed? In changing the industry, I mean." "They already have," Zeke replied. "Every prejudice they challenge, every assumption they question, every problem they solve with compassion instead of just cleverness, it ripples outward. The industry won't change overnight, but it will change. One design at a time, one engineer at a time." As they prepared to leave, Zeke took one last look around the workshop. The space that had once been empty now thrummed with potential. Projects in various stages of completion lined the walls, each one representing a young mind learning to see the world through an engineer's eyes. "Elena would have loved this place," he said softly. "She always said the best teachers are the ones who learn to see the world through their students' eyes." "She's here," Vivienne replied. "In every lesson you teach, every life you change, every bridge you build between what is and what could be." Zeke nodded, then turned off the lights and locked the door. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new stories to tell. But tonight he was content knowing that somewhere in Monaco, 30 young minds were dreaming of a future where engineering served not just efficiency, but humanity itself. The foundation was more than a school. It was a promise that the next generation would build not just better machines, but a better world. And in that promise, Zeke had found not just redemption for past regrets, but hope for futures yet to be imagined. His legacy wasn't just the Tempest gathering dust in a showroom. It was the spark of possibility he'd lit in 30 young hearts, each one destined to burn bright in ways he could never have imagined. 1 year later, Zeke received an unexpected phone call. A collector in Geneva wanted to sell his Veloce Tempest, the exact car from Castellano's showroom. The asking price was beyond Zeke's means, but Marcus had a different idea. The foundation needs a centerpiece, Marcus explained during their weekly meeting, something that represents the bridge between past innovation and future possibility. When the midnight blue Tempest arrived at the workshop, Zeke's students gathered around it with reverence. But instead of keeping it pristine, Zeke made a decision that shocked everyone. "We're going to take it apart," he announced. "Professor," Amara gasped, "it's worth millions." "And it's about to become worth so much more," Zeke smiled. "This car has been a museum piece for too long. It's time for it to become a teacher." Over the following months, the students carefully disassembled the Tempest, documenting every component, every connection, every design decision. They studied Zeke's original blueprints alongside the actual parts, understanding how theory had become reality. The disassembled Tempest became the foundation's most powerful teaching tool. Students could touch the carbon fiber monocoque, feel the precision of the machined components, trace the evolution from Zeke's hand-drawn sketches to the physical manifestation of his dreams. "This is what courage looks like," Zeke told his students as they examined the engine he'd designed 30 years earlier. "Not the finished product, but the willingness to transform an impossible idea into something real." Visitors to the foundation would often find Zeke sitting quietly beside the disassembled car, his weathered hands holding pieces of his life's work. He wasn't mourning the destruction of a masterpiece. He was celebrating its transformation into something even more valuable, inspiration for the next generation of dreamers, who would build tomorrow's impossibilities into today's realities.